Everton, the £500 million stairway to nowhere. It began with a billionaire's promise and ended with a calculator. On a cold night at Goodison Park, the old lady of English football, the air usually smells of history, woodbine, and desperation. But since 2016, it has smelled like corporate malpractice. Farhad Moshiri arrived with a suitcase full of ambition and a total lack of footballing gravity. He didn't just want to compete, he wanted to buy the table. Between 2016 and 2024, Everton spent over £700 million on transfers. The result? 2 separate points deductions for breaching profit and sustainability rules, PSR, and a club that has spent the better part of 3 seasons staring into the abyss of the championship. The soul of Everton wasn't lost in the defeats, it was lost in the spreadsheets. Moshiri's tenure was a masterclass in winning the transfer window while losing the plot. They bought number 10s like they were collecting Pokemon cards, Gylfi Sigurdsson, Davy Klaassen, Wayne Rooney, all occupying the same grass, all signed with zero tactical cohesion. But the real extraction wasn't just financial, it was the identity of the people's club. As the debt mounted toward the £1 billion mark, fueled by the construction of the new Bramley-Moore Dock Stadium, the club's connection to its community became collateral. The fans were told the new stadium was the gateway to the elite. Instead, it became a dead anchor. While the concrete rose at the docks, the spirit at Goodison was being hollowed out by boardroom silence and the hiring of Rafa Benitez, the ultimate soul-killing appointment for a fan base that defines itself by its rivalry with Liverpool. It was the equivalent of a corporate merger where the CEO hires the rival firm's most hated manager to streamline operations. If you saw our previous video on the 7 levels of a current Premier League player, you'll remember the nearly men at level 4. Everton is a club of nearly men led by never-should-have-beens. The soul of the club is currently sitting in a bank vault, waiting for a takeover that may or may not arrive before the lights go out. Chelsea, the billion-pound laboratory. If Manchester United is an extraction, Chelsea is a disruption. When Todd Boehly and Clearlake Capital walked into Stamford Bridge in 2022, they didn't just buy a football club, they bought a data set. They looked at a club that had won 2 Champions Leagues in a decade through ruthless, short-term pragmatism and decided it needed to be a Silicon Valley startup. The soul of Roman Abramovich's Chelsea was cold, efficient, and fueled by a win-now-or-get-sacked mentality. It was brutal, but it was an identity. Boehly's Chelsea replaced that with the project. £1 billion spent in 3 windows. 8-year contracts designed to amortize costs, a word that fans now know better than the names of their own bench players. But here is the number that hurts, £0. That is the pure profit value assigned to academy graduates like Mason Mount and Conor Gallagher. In the new Chelsea, the soul of the Cobham Academy, the most successful youth system in the world, has been commodified. Gallagher wasn't sold because he wasn't good enough. He was sold because his sale represented a clean accounting entry to balance the books after buying players like Mykhailo Mudryk for £88 million. When you sell the captain who has been at the club since he was 6 years old just to satisfy a PSR calculation, you aren't running a football club, you're running a hedge fund with a jersey. The atmosphere at the bridge has shifted from a fortress of defiance to a theater of confusion. Fans look at a squad of 40-plus players and struggle to find a heartbeat. It's a billion-pound experiment where the humans are the variables and the spreadsheet is the constant. Manchester United, the leaking roof and the £1.2 billion dividend. We have to go back here because the rot is systemic. You saw the footage of the rain cascading through the Old Trafford roof during the Arsenal match in 2024. It wasn't just a plumbing issue, it was a metaphor. While the Glazers were extracting £1.187 billion for debt interest and dividends, the theatre of dreams was literally falling apart. But the loss of soul at United goes deeper than chipped tiles in the swimming pool. It's the loss of the United way. Since Sir Alex Ferguson retired in 2013, the club has cycled through 10 managers, each bringing a different, often conflicting, philosophy. David Moyes brought hard work, Van Gaal brought the process, Mourinho brought the siege, and Ten Hag brought the system. The result is a Frankenstein's monster of a squad. Players bought for one manager's dream becoming the next manager's nightmare. The soul was lost when the club stopped being a football institution and started being a global media platform. When the commercial department becomes more powerful than the scouting department, you end up with a team of individual brands rather than a collective unit. Sir Jim Ratcliffe's 2024 takeover promised a performance-led culture, but his first move was to cut 250 jobs, including the termination of Sir Alex Ferguson's ambassadorial contract. To save £2 million while wasting hundreds of millions on transfers like Antony is the ultimate corporate irony. The soul of Manchester United isn't in the trophies anymore. It's in the nostalgia of a fan base that is being asked to pay higher ticket prices to watch a hospital of a training ground produce a team that struggles to beat Bournemouth at home. Leicester City, the fairy tale that hit a wall. In 2016, Leicester City provided the greatest soul-affirming moment in sports history. 5,000 to 1. The unrepeatable miracle. They were the family club, the team that proved the elite could be toppled. But the 2020s have been a brutal lesson in the price of ambition. To stay at the top, Leicester tried to play the Big Six game. They built a world-class training facility for £100 million. They kept players on high wages to avoid being a selling club. But the Premier League's financial gravity is undefeated. When they missed out on Champions League qualification on the final day for 2 consecutive seasons, the financial model shattered. The soul of the club, that underdog spirit, was replaced by a desperate scramble for survival. Relegation in 2023 was a shock, but the 2024 PSR charges were the final blow. The club that gave us the miracle was now being accused of gaming the system. The loss of identity at Leicester is a quiet tragedy. The connection between the late owner Vikhai Srivaddhanaprabha and the city was profound. But as the club transitioned into a Tier 1 organization, it lost the very thing that made it special, the ability to overachieve without overspending. Now they are a club in a cycle of yo-yoing between divisions, burdened by the costs of their own brief period of greatness. It's the Icarus story of the Premier League. They flew too close to the Champions League sun, and their wings were made of unsustainable debt. Wolverhampton Wanderers, the Mendes colony. Walk around Molineux, and you'll see the statues of Billy Wright and Stan Cullis. You'll hear about the old gold and the nights they pioneered European football under the floodlights. But since Fosun International took over in 2016, Wolves has felt less like a black country institution and more like a regional office for the agency Gestafute. The soul of Wolves was traded for a direct line to Jorge Mendes. It worked, initially. They went from the Championship to Europe with a squad that looked like the Portuguese national team. But eventually, the agency-led model becomes a revolving door. When the club's recruitment is tied so heavily to one man's portfolio, the club ceases to have its own scouting identity. The fans at Molineux are some of the most passionate in the world, but there is a growing sense of fatigue. The soul is lost when the players on the pitch feel like they are just passing through on their way to a bigger Mendes client. When Ruben Neves, the heartbeat of the team, left for Saudi Arabia, a piece of the club's modern soul went with him. Now, Wolves are caught in a cycle of sell-to-buy, struggling to keep their best talent, while the golden identity feels increasingly like a corporate branding exercise. They have the stadium, they have the history, but they are searching for a heartbeat that doesn't belong to an agent in a Lisbon boardroom. Southampton, the broken black box. For a decade, Southampton was the smartest room in the Premier League. Their black box scouting system was the envy of Europe. They found Sadio Mane, Virgil van Dijk, and Dusan Tadic. They lost their best players every summer and replaced them with better ones. They were the model club. The soul of Southampton was its competence. But competence is fragile. When the ownership shifted to Sport Republic in 2022, the black box was discarded for a new data-driven model that prioritized youth at any cost. They bought 10 players in one window with an average age of 21. It was a football manager save brought to life, and it failed spectacularly. Relegation followed. The soul of the club, the tactical identity established by managers like Pochettino and Koeman, was replaced by a chaotic search for a philosophy. The fans, used to seeing world-class talent, were suddenly watching a team that didn't know how to defend a corner. The St. Mary's atmosphere, once vibrant and demanding, became a place of resignation. Southampton lost its soul because it stopped believing in its own expertise and started believing in a disruptor model that forgot that football matches are won by humans, not just high-ceiling prospects. Manchester City, the 115-charge cloud. This is the most controversial entry, but it has to be addressed. Manchester City are the most successful team in the world right now. They play the most beautiful football ever seen on English soil. But for a large section of the footballing world, the club has lost its soul to the machine of state ownership and alleged financial irregularity. The soul of the old Manchester City. The typical city that could lose to anyone, the club that played at Main Road in the third tier, is still there in the older fans. But the modern institution is a global behemoth. The 115 charges brought by the Premier League in 2023 hang over every trophy like a shadow. If a club's success is built on creative accounting, as alleged by the league, what does that do to the soul of the competition? The Etihad is a cathedral of perfection, but perfection can be sterile. When winning becomes a mathematical certainty, the soul of sport, the uncertainty, the drama, the hopeless hope, starts to wither. City is a club that has traded the romance of the struggle for the efficiency of the empire. It is the most impressive football project in history. But as we see the legal battles play out in 2026, the question remains, at what cost did this dominance arrive? If the trophies are eventually asterisked, what is left of the soul? Tottenham Hotspur, the five-star hotel with a football problem. If you want to understand the modern identity crisis of Tottenham Hotspur, Don't look at the trophy cabinet. Look at the cheese room. Or rather, the one that was promised but never actually built. In 2019, Spurs opened the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium, a £1 billion marvel of engineering featuring a retractable pitch, an in-house microbrewery, and the longest bar in Europe. It is, by all accounts, the finest multi-purpose entertainment venue in the world. The problem? For a decade, the club has operated as if the football was merely the pre-show for the real business, hosting NFL games, Beyoncé concerts, and high-margin corporate hospitality. The soul of Spurs was always to dare is to do, the flamboyant, slightly chaotic spirit of Bill Nicholson's double winners. But under Ian Icey and Daniel Levy, that spirit has been sanitized into a top-four accounting exercise. Between 2001 and 2024, the club's valuation skyrocketed, yet the silverware remained stagnant, a solitary League Cup in 23 years. The soul was lost in the transition from the intimacy of White Hart Lane to the cavernous, high-tech commerciality of the new ground. Fans who used to feel like part of a community now feel like customers being optimized for average revenue per user. The appointment of Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte were the ultimate symptoms of this lost soul, hiring serial winners to paper over the cracks of a squad that had lost its technical identity. Players like James Maddison are currently trying to inject some of that old flair back into the system, but the corporate weight of the stadium debt remains the true manager of the club. Spurs didn't lose their soul to a villain, they lost it to a balance sheet. West Ham United, the ghost of Upton Park. May 10, 2016. The final game at the Bullen Ground. The air was thick with smoke, nostalgia, and a visceral sense of belonging as West Ham beat Manchester United 3-2. It was the Academy of Football, a place where the proximity of the fans to the pitch made it a hostile, suffocating fortress. Fast forward to the present, and West Ham play in the London Stadium, a converted Olympic venue where fans are separated from the action by a running track and several layers of architectural regret. The soul of West Ham wasn't just in the players, it was in the Upton Park atmosphere. The move, orchestrated by the GSB, Gold, Sullivan, and Brady board, was sold as the only way to reach the next level. But the next level turned out to be years of fan protests, pitch invasions, and a team that felt like a guest in its own home. The London Stadium is a public sector masterpiece but a footballing vacuum. The board's management style, defined by penny pinching on infrastructure while spending erratically on name signings, created a fracture that even a Conference League trophy in 2023 couldn't fully heal. You can move a club, but you can't move the ghosts. West Ham is a Premier League staple, but many fans still look at the luxury flat standing where the Bobby Moore stand used to be and wonder if the global brand was worth the loss of the East End heart. Blackburn Rovers, the Chicken Run. Blackburn is the only club to have won the Premier League and then fallen as far as League One. In 1995, they were the pinnacle of English football, fueled by the local passion and the deep pockets of Jack Walker. But when the Venkies, an Indian poultry conglomerate, took over in 2010, the soul of the club was subjected to a decade of unintentional comedy and intentional mismanagement. The Venkies era began with the sacking of Sam Allardyce via a phone call and the appointment of Steve Keane, a move that triggered years of protests. The low point? A live chicken, draped in a Blackburn flag, being released onto the pitch during a crucial match against Wigan. The soul of Blackburn was a proud, industrial, community-led identity. The Venkies turned it into a case study on how not to run a sports franchise. They allowed the squad that Jack Walker built to atrophy, ignored the fans' pleas for transparency, and watched as the club slid down the pyramid. While they have found some stability in recent years, the scar of the chicken run remains. It's a reminder that when a club is treated as a promotional tool for a business interest that doesn't understand the offside rule, the fans are the ones who pay the price in tears and relegations. Arsenal, the long sleep of silent Stan. For years, Arsenal was the standard bearer for the right way. Under Arsene Wenger, they played the most sophisticated football in the country and built a self-sustaining model that was the envy of the league. But the move from Highbury to the Emirates in 2006 signaled the start of a long sleep. The soul of the club, that invincible defiance, was replaced by a top four as a trophy mentality dictated by the ownership of Stan Kroenke. Kroenke, known as Silent Stan, rarely spoke to the fans and seemed content to let the club stagnate as long as the Champions League revenue kept flowing. The soul was lost in the transition from a football club to a global real estate and media asset. The Wenger-out era was the sound of a soul screaming for help, a fan base tired of being told that financial stability was more important than winning the league. While the Mikel Arteta era has seen a massive resurrection. As we called it in our previous script, the years of banter-era mediocrity showed how easily a giant can lose its way when the man at the top is only looking at the stock price. Arsenal is currently reclaiming its soul, but the 2010s remain a warning. If you stop daring to be the best, you eventually forget how to be yourself. Nottingham Forest, the chaos of 30 signings. Forest is a club defined by the myth of Brian Clough, 2 European Cups, a tight-knit squad, and a manager who ruled with a stick and a carrot. But since Evangelos Marinakis took over in 2017, that tight-knit identity has been replaced by a high-turnover, high-chaos model. Upon promotion to the Premier League in 2022, Forest signed 22 players in a single window. Then they signed more. Then they signed some more. As we discussed in the 7 Levels video regarding Elliot Anderson, Forest is a club that buys its way to competitiveness. But when you have a squad turnover that rivals a transit lounge at Heathrow, what happens to the soul? The connection between the players and the city ground feels transactional. The manager is always one bad week away from the sack, and the owner's legal battles and outbursts create a permanent cloud of instability. Forest is Premier League in name and budget, but the spirit of Clough's miracle men feels a world away from this blue-colite approach to squad building. Aston Villa, the Tony Sia fever dream. Villa is a foundational club of the English game. But in 2016, following relegation, the club was sold to Dr. Tony Sia. What followed was a fever dream of recon branding, J-curve growth projections, and social media posts that looked like they were written by a bot. Sia promised to make Villa the biggest club in the world, but he nearly made them a liquidated club. By 2018, Villa was days away from insolvency. Tax bills were unpaid, and the club was on the verge of a Bolton-style collapse. The soul of Villa, the pride of the Midlands, was being gambled on a man whose funds were frozen in China. It took the arrival of current owners and SWE to save them, but the Sia years exposed how easily a 150-year-old institution can be pushed to the brink by a single owner with a PowerPoint presentation and no cash. Bolton Wanderers, the cost of a Big Sam hangover. In the early 2000s, Bolton Wanderers were the coolest team in the league. J.J. Okocha, Yuri Djorkaeff, Fernando Hierro, all playing under Sam Allardyce at the Reebok Stadium. They were the nearly men of Europe, punching far above their weight. But that success was built on a foundation of high wages and heavy borrowing. When Big Sam left, the soul of that overachieving unit vanished, replaced by a decade of financial rot. By 2019, Bolton reached the ultimate soul death. They were so broke they couldn't provide food for staff or players. They were forced to play a team of teenagers in League One, losing 5-0 and 6-0 as they spiraled toward liquidation. The club was saved at the 11th hour by Football Ventures, but the journey from Okocha's stepovers to nearly ceasing to exist is the ultimate cautionary tale of Premier League ambition gone wrong. Wimbledon FC, the literal theft. Finally, we have the only club on this list that didn't just lose its soul, it had its body stolen. Wimbledon FC, the crazy gang, the team that defied the odds to beat Liverpool in the 1988 FA Cup final. In 2002, a government-appointed commission allowed the club to move 70 miles away to Milton Keynes, citing that a move was in the best interests of football. It was the first time an English club was franchised in the American style. The fans refused to follow. They stayed in South London and formed AFC Wimbledon, starting from the very bottom of the pyramid. The original club became MK Dons, a club with no history and a stolen place in the league. Wimbledon FC didn't lose its soul to a bad owner or a leaking roof. It was murdered by a committee. The resurrection of AFC Wimbledon is the ultimate proof that the soul of a club doesn't live in the trophy cabinet or the stadium. It lives in the fans. MK Dons has the stadium, but AFC Wimbledon kept the soul. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, leave a like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe cause I'll be posting frequently here.